All right, so today we shall begin with introduction to Immanuel Kant, who is now going to start. Now is going to start the real philosophy. What I mean by that, I'm kidding, right? We've been doing real philosophy, but what I mean by that is that he's the typical philosopher. He is German, he writes like a German, and it's you know, good, substantial German stuff, right? I compare his philosophy to German bread. Anybody had German bread ever? You can raise your hand. Am I the only one? One person, okay, Maurice said, had German bread. So if you're familiar with German bread, it's very like compact, it's very nutritious, it's serious bread, not like the bread you find here in the States. So, oh, who is this three who is Dutch? Who are you three? I'm intrigued. There's somebody called Three. Okay, so Three, so you might know a little bit about the bread then, if you're coming from Europe. So, okay, so he is really going to be, now we're going to be switching, right? The first three texts we've been doing, to be honest, have been, hopefully you haven't struggled too much with them because it's about to get worse, right? But these texts have been kind of the appetizers. It's a lot of poetry, dialogues, right? Now we're going to get into more systematic, analytic approach to philosophy. And the texts are going to get progressively harder, right? So you should brace yourselves. Malita, if you can't hear anything, it's your fault. There's nothing I can do. But I'm glad that you've joined us, Malita. All right, good. All right, so here's the outline for today. Let's see, number one, I'm going to talk about the modern era. And then small a is going to be the progress of science. Small b is going to be the progress of morality. And then 2 is going to be Kant. And then small a, his biography. And b, his philosophy. Okay, great. All right, so let's start a little bit with the time that Kant is in, right? Remember, in this class, we're traveling in space and in time. So we left off in Afghanistan with Rumi. And this was the golden age of Islam. It's a very different, we're going to shift now, right? From the golden age of Islam, poetry, all of this, you know, magnificent writing, right? We're now switching, we're moving west to Germany, and we're also moving in time, right? We were in medieval time in the 12th century. Now we're moving into the 18th century with Immanuel Kant, right? So it's a very different worldview, and different things are taking place there intellectually. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the philosophical, the intellectual climate of Germany at the time, so that we can then situate Kant in his intellectual context. So we are now beyond the golden age of Islam. We are in an era called the modern era, modernity. Okay, so this is the era that arises out of the Enlightenment. This is where and the main feature of that era is two things, right? Number one, discarding religion. So we're moving now away from religion. This is the first time all of the philosophers we've studied, apart from Plato, right? Song of Songs, Rumi were religious authors. Now we're moving away. So there's a shedding of religion. And there is now an emphasis on our own rational capacities, right? So we're moving from God-centered universe to a human-centered universe. That's modernity, right? Let me write it down. So we're moving from a God-centered universe to a human-centered, right, universe. So that's the shift, right, that we're making. In fact, this shift has been compared to the Copernican shift, even though it's moving in the opposite direction, right? Anybody remember what Copernicus discovered? Let's see, anybody? What was the great discovery of Copernicus? Let's see how many of you are nerds. I know some of you know this. Speak up if you know, or put it in the chat. Okay, so Copernicus.
The model of the universe or something like that?
Exactly. What happened to the universe? Here we have an answer. So from Hugh, the Earth revolves around the sun. Exactly. Instead of the sun revolving around the earth. So we have a Copernican shift, right? What was at the center goes to the periphery. What was at the periphery goes to the center. This is what we're having now with modernity. God was at the center. Boom, he moves at the periphery. Human beings were in the periphery. Now they move in the centers. This kind of, it's as important a shift as the Copernican shift in astronomy, right? We have a complete reworking of our cosmology, right? So we're shedding religion, and there are many reasons for that, right? Especially in Europe, there's several reasons. There's two main reasons that scholars have gathered with regards to this shedding of religion. Number one, Europeans are tired of all of the conflicts and the wars that Christianity, which is the main religion of Europe at the time, has brought, right? Constantly fighting, constantly, right, from the Crusades, the Inquisition, and so forth. So Europeans are sick and tired. And then, of course, in Germany, you have the Reformation, right, which has kind of dismantled Catholicism. So, and the Reformation, if you're familiar with it, is a much more human-centered approach to Christianity, right? The individual is supposed to study and not just obey, right? In one of the main contributions of the Reformation, which, if you recall, was started by Martin Luther, right? And was a subversion of Catholicism, where Catholicism was more authoritarian, and Protestantism, right, which comes out of the Reformation, which is where Germany is really about affirming the individual's right to know and study and understand and work for their salvation, not just receive, right, the grace. So we're really shifting, right? Even Christianity is shifting, right? So first reason had to do with the way that, you know, we're tired of the wars, we're tired of the authoritarianism, we're tired of the tyranny and the obscurantism. We learned that word, I think, last time, right? I mentioned that the Christian world was still very much keeping the knowledge away from the masses. Only the elites could know, right? So people are sick and tired of that. So they're shedding that. The other reason, right, why people start to shed religion is the rise of science. Okay, so make sure you write these two reasons, right? Number one, we have sick of the wars and the oppression and the tyranny of the church. And number two, the rise of science, right? These are the two main reasons why modernity is moving away from religion. Rise of science, we realize that we don't need God to fix our problems anymore. We can do it ourselves, right? So for example, if there's a drought, there's no need to multiply prayers or to parade, you know, an image of the Christ and in the streets, right? Or of the Virgin Mary, right? To attract rain. You can actually think through a way to do it, right? Maybe conceive a complex irrigation system or a way to trap water. You know, we can do this, right? We don't need to invoke the deities. So that's second reason, right? Why people are like, we don't need this, right? Christianity becomes a superfluous hypothesis, right? I'm writing it down. It's a hypothesis that we don't need. That's what it means, superfluous hypothesis. Okay, so people have talked about this era of modernity as the coming of age of humanity. I'm typing it up here. Right, this is similar to the adolescent crisis, right? You leave behind the childhood, you become an adult. That's what it means to come of age. Okay, Morissette, you have a comment?
Isn't it weird, Professor, that in some kind of way we're kind of going backward again?
We're becoming more religious, you mean?
Yeah.
So America is a little different, right? The United States. In Europe, it's finished. Religion is finished in Europe.
Yes, I know, but I'm talking about the United States.
Yeah, United States was founded by religious people, right? I mean, you had people fleeing persecution who were deeply religious, and they founded the country. So there's a more historically sympathetic approach, right, to religion. And they didn't go through the trauma of the church, because the pilgrims that came to the US were not Catholics. They were Protestants. They were, right, they were not about persecution, intolerance, although now, to be honest, we're getting there, right, as a nation. But initially, right, these were people who were not interested in domination or power. We are shifting, by the way, as a country. I believe Christianity is shifting now to wanting more and more power, political power. But at the time, people were not interested in power. They were not interested, right? They were the product of the Reformation. It was a different brand of Christianity. They didn't have the trauma of all of the wars and the persecutions. So Americans in general are more sympathetic to religion than Europeans, right? And this is a main difference between the two countries, right? But if you go to Europe today, you walk in a church, there's nobody there. Every single denomination, by the way, Catholic, Protestant, everybody, it's empty, right? So it's right. The really modernity has really vanquished Christianity as far as Europe is concerned. US is a blend, I think, of modernity and still a very powerful Christian spirit. Okay, where was I? Answer your question, Morissette?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, good. All right. So what's interesting now, moving to the second point, right? I said that I would talk about the progress of science and then the progress of morality. So moving to that second point, what's interesting is that as philosophers were watching, right, the progress of science. And by the way, with the progress of science came the idea of progress in general, the idea that, well, with science, we can actually become better. We can fix ourselves. We can really overcome the evils of the world, of nature, right? With science, technology, we can overcome disease, we can overcome, climate issues and so forth. So we really believed at the time that we could reach this kind of highly evolved state, right? Where we would reach complete domination of evil, right? Of the natural evils that surround us. So philosophers are watching this and they're thinking, maybe through the use of our mind, we can also not only conquer nature, but we can conquer human nature. Okay, so make sure you write this down, that philosophers are watching science, right? And they're saying, how interesting that the mind can conquer the natural world, right? With the mind, we can conquer disease, we can conquer droughts, we can conquer storms, we can find a way, right? And so they're thinking maybe with the proper use of the mind and of reason, we can also conquer ourselves, our human nature, the evil within, right? So science is conquering the evil without, and philosophers are thinking, maybe we can conquer the evil within. Maybe we can make human beings perfect without religion, right? Simply by proper use of the mind and of the reasoning faculty, we can actually progress as human beings and become perfected morally. So this is an amazing dream, right? Or idea or ideal that philosophers at the time had. And one of the main persons talking about this was Hobbes, right? And Kant actually is subtly responding to Hobbes. So we need to talk a little bit about Hobbes so you can see how Kant is going to move away from him, right? But one of the main interesting things about Hobbes was his approach to morality, right? So let's first go into how Christianity approached it and then see how Hobbes is going to approach it, right? So let's begin. And then we'll look at Kant. So these are the three, right? We'll look at Christianity, approach to morality, then Hobbes. Oops. I can't spell Hobbes, sorry. And then Kant, right? So Christianity, when it comes to morality, how did they try to make human beings better? What was the method? What was the incentive they gave people? You have to be good. Here's why. Anybody know? Where are my Catholics?
You have to be perfect in the eyes of God, like technically.
Yes, and what happens if you're not perfect?
Oh, you go straight to hell.
Exactly.
Like,
What the hell? Very good. Right? So Christianity had this great, right, concept that if you're not good, right, you should be good. Here's how to be good. But if you're not good, this is what's waiting for you. So that's a great incentive. People are going to, be scared into being good, right? So the attitude is more an attitude. So Christianity's technique was one of coercion, right? Scare tactics. So Hobbes is, and it worked to a certain degree. People were trying, but they never really became good because deep down, they still wanted to be corrupt, but were just scared out of doing it, right? So Hobbes is watching this and he's thinking, I don't like this technique because this is in a way making people into infants, into children. This is not empowering them, right? We are not empowering people by just scaring them into being good. We're not really changing them. So he came up with a different idea. to how to rally people to morality. And he said, we need to treat, so number one thing he said against Christianity, in contrast to Christianity, is that we need to not force them, but we need to convince them or seduce them into being moral. And to do that, we have to show them that being moral is in their interest. Okay, so do you see the difference between Hobbes and Christianity, right? So Hobbes is saying we need to seduce them, convince people that morality is in their interest, right? Whereas Christianity, we're just going to force you, right? Force, coerce, scare, right? So he's thinking it's going to be more sustainable, right? People will embrace morality more eagerly, right? If they are convinced that it is in their interest to be good. And so morality will be more coming from them rather than imposed from the outside. They'll want to do it, right? So Hobbes is trying to actually make people want to be moral. And he feels that if I can make them want to be moral, their morality will be more deeply and rooted in them. They will become more eagerly moral, right? They will become more naturally moral. Okay, everybody understands the difference? This first difference, put your hand in the screen if you get what I'm saying. Okay, very good. All right. So this is how he did it, right? He had a great argument that he tells in his big book called The Leviathan. Leviathan basically means big, it's basically big sea monster. And I won't go into why he entitled the book like this, but that's his main moral treatise, right? So there he says, here's the argument I'm going to use to convince people that it is in their interest to be moral. So he says, let us imagine a society with no morality, no rules. What would it look like? Okay, what do you think? What would it look like? A society with no rules.
It would be chaos.
Okay, good. Yes, who else spoke?
There wouldn't be like laws, but technically like crimes would be committed. People would be assaulting each other, hurting each other, and just being very selfish.
Very good, right? It would be complete chaos. Yes, chaotic. Lo had something to say. Aguirre, you also have something to say?
Yeah, I already said it.
Okay, very good.
There will be a chaos, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Lo, you want to add?
Yeah, I think that there would just be no society.
Okay, yes, absolutely. Right, so it will be the equivalent of the movie The Purge, which you shouldn't see. I don't plan to see it, right? But I get the idea from the from the poster, right? So it's a complete disaster. So he says, so he asked his audience, right? He says, do you want this? Do you want to live in total chaos? Do you want to always be watching your back and always be scared someone's going to kill you? So isn't it good? Isn't it in our interest to follow the rules and to be moral? And then people, of course, happily will say, yes, let's do it. Because if we are all moral, if we all choose morality and choose to follow the rules, basic rules of right and wrong, we will create a society which is safe, which is fruitful, which is productive. We can cooperate rather than destroy each other. And so at the end of his argument, people are basically convinced, yes, I want to be moral for my own good. It is in my interest to be moral. Let's go, let's do it, right? So that's his argument. Now, what's interesting is that, and I'm going to highlight this idea because Kant will actually go against it. For him, there's actually a connection between morality and happiness, right? In other words, what he's arguing is if you want to be happy, be moral. Right? If you want to live in a prosperous society, be safe, be protected, right? Be able to cooperate with everyone, you just have, right? The condition is morality. So morality leads to happiness. The incentive to be moral is not hell, it's happiness, right? Notice the shift he's making. It's very smart, actually. It's a very intelligent shift. Instead of saying, be moral because otherwise you'll go to hell, he's saying that nobody, that's not, scare tactics don't work. What will work is incentives. So he says, if you're moral, look at the society we can build, look at how safe you will be. It is in your interest to be moral. Okay, so morality for Hobbes equals to happiness, right? Okay, now, some of you should have noticed the problem with Hobbes' theory of morality. Anybody feel slightly uncomfortable with his whole argument? And if you do, you're probably going to be thinking like Kant. So let's see. Is there anybody who thinks there's something missing in this approach to morality?
I mean, I guess if not everyone agrees to do it, then if you're the one person who's doing it and no one else is doing it, then you're stuck.
Oh yeah, true, true. Although, even if you're doing it, at least you'll have friends, right? People will respect you to a certain degree. They to a certain degree, right? So, but yeah, you have a point. But I'm talking more on the level, not on the level of your happiness that might be ruined by you being the only one, but on the level of morality. What is missing in terms of the moral depth of what he's saying, right? Lo, you want to try?
Yeah, I think that a lot of different people have different ideas of what is moral, and therefore it needs clarification on like you still need a set of rules because many like a lot of people like what's moral to me is different than what's moral to like another person, the person next to me. So I think there needs to be like clarification.
Yeah, so his whole book clarifies that, right? He's basically talking about morality being whatever is going to build a successful society, right? So anything that destroys the society is immoral. Anything that builds the community is moral. That's how he would see it. So killing, stealing, this is disintegrating, right? Whereas, so he goes into depth. So with Hobbes, we have a clear view, right? Of basically acting in a way that is constructive to society. And okay, very good, Bella, you got it. Okay, from three who's asking a question. How fun! I wonder who that is. Okay, so the benefits of being moral, as I mentioned, right, is happiness. Is a society which is safe, where you don't have to watch your back, right, and so forth. Okay, now the problem with Hobbes, right? Three, you raise your hand. You want to add? Finally, I can see you, who you are. Go ahead.
Professor, you know who I am, but I'm not putting my video on. You told me to come on anonymous.
Ah, yes, okay, very good.
So the question you had asked, like, what's the problem with Hobbes' approach? I said that it's that the people do not know what are the benefits for them. Like, okay, yes, it is in my interest to personally want to be moral, but what do I get from it?
So you get, the idea is that we all want to be moral, obviously, right? Otherwise it doesn't work. Like, I don't know who pointed out, but one of you did, right? So if we're all moral, we are safe because we don't have to constantly watch our back, somebody gonna kill us to take our possessions, right? There's police, there's laws, there's enforcement. So in that sense, we feel safe and we can cooperate. And in that sense, we're happier. Does that make sense, three?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, three, can you see me after class?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Okay, since I caught you. All right, very good. Okay, so so you're pointing out the problems with regards to the incentive, but you're not pointing out the problems with regards to the actual morality that's going to come out of that, right? You're talking about the incentive not working out. But there is a moral problem with Hobbes' moral philosophy, right? And Bella mentioned it, but Tamam, you want to give it a try?
Isn't the main problem that then everyone's going to have their own definition of what's considered moral?
No, because remember, he's writing the whole book on, and morality is, he defines it very narrowly as whatever contributes to the cohesion of society, right? So if anything you're doing is disintegrating, whether it's disintegrating the family or disintegrating a person, or disintegrating, right? That is considered immoral for Hobbes, right? So it's all based on the society. So in a way, for Hobbes, eating another human being, for example, not a problem, doesn't disintegrate society, right? So morality for Hobbes is entirely centered on keeping the society together, right? Lo, you want to add?
So is it the fact that not every single person who's moral like achieves true happiness?
No, you're still with the incentive. Everybody, you're so American, guys. You're looking at the incentive. What's the problem? What's the moral problem with Hobbes' moral philosophy? Let's see. Okay, so Bello, you're living in postmodernity, where there are many different people from different cultures. In the modern epoch, everybody has the same beliefs.
Oh, Professor, I might have gotten it.
Okay, Kanai, go ahead.
Is it the seduction part? Because in order to seduce someone, I don't think that will be morally intact, because at the back of your mind, you're coming up with a strategy that a person is not able to see. So that's not what you call morality.
Okay.
Like true morality.
You're close. You're burning. Okay, can I? Oh, sorry, Three's burning. Who wants to add to Three's point of view? Who thinks they can elaborate? Okay, let me elaborate. Right, Bella also mentioned it in the chat for those of you who read it. Right, the problem with what Hobbes is saying is that it doesn't make you any less selfish. You're still selfish, right? You're still interested in yourself, but for the sake of your own happiness, you become a better person. But that's kind of a veneer. That's not real. You're not really changing. In other words, let me explain, right? Remember, Hobbes, one of the main quotes from Hobbes is that man is a wolf for man. So for him, we are naturally evil, right? And so we have to convince the wolves that we are, that it's in our interest to be good. That way we can try our best to be good, but we're still wolves, right? And that's the problem with Hobbes' moral philosophy, is that it doesn't really hit at the root of the problem. You are still a selfish, voracious wolf, but now you're acting nice so that you can get a nice society to support you, right? And that's the problem, right? Anybody want to add? I saw a few hands. So yes, Bello, right? The intentions behind the good or corrupt. You're not doing it for other people. You're doing it for yourself. You're still a selfish wolf, right? You don't change. You don't change, right? Morissette had a hand, and somebody else, I think. Lo also.
Isn't it the whole point of the social contract, technically?
Yeah, Hobbes is talking about the social contract, right? But the foundation of the social contract is based really on the selfishness of individuals, right? So if you want to be happy, the social contract says, if you want to be happy, be good, right? And the problem with that is that
Oblige.
Yeah, you're not really good. You're not really good naturally. You're good in order to be happy. You're in it for yourself, right? There's nothing has shifted in your moral constitution. You're still a wolf, but you're a nice wolf now. Does that make sense, Morissette?
Yeah.
Okay. There was Lo also. Lo, you want to add?
I guess I'm just a little bit confused, because I feel as if like being a moral person and being a good person aren't synonyms. Being a moral person and acting on morals, you could still be an awful person, but you're acting on a set of morals, and therefore you are a moral person. Being a good person is having good intentions and doing things for the good of others. Like, I do think that there's a difference. Like, I think that someone could be an extremely moral person and be awful.
Yeah, very good. I like your distinction. The problem, yeah. So I would say you're moral on the outside, but you're not moral on the inside. Does that work? Does that clarify?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So that's the idea. When you look at Hobbes' moral philosophy, you realize that the morality is just a behavior. It's not an actual state of being. It doesn't shift the wolf. The wolf remains a wolf, but it's a wolf who is nice, opening the door, paying the taxes. It's still a wolf. Right. So that's the issue that Kant will take with Hobbes' morality, right? So we'll go, maybe we can go right now even in Kant, and then I'll tell you a few things about his life briefly at the end. So Kant is going, so now we're going into Kant, right? We had Christianity, Hobbes, now we go. So Kant is going to say, what I don't like about Hobbes. So yes, it's a smart move, right? Hobbes it's a brilliant move to harness the selfish energy of the wolf into moral behavior, because that's what it's doing. Hobbes, in a way, is a brilliant capitalist, right? We take the selfishness and we channel it for the good of society. It's a brilliant move, because now all of the selfishness of the wolves is channeled into them being good, nice, so that they can be productive and happy, right? So that's a brilliant move, but morally speaking, it doesn't shift anything, right? So Kant is going to say we need to see things differently, right? So he's going to have, there are three main points where he will differ from Hobbes. So let me write this down. So Hobbes versus Kant, right? Three main points. So point one, I'm going to first write out Hobbes, and then we'll look at Kant. So Hobbes says man is inherently a wolf. bad person, right? We are inherently bad because if we are left to our own devices, remember what will happen? Chaos. Well, that tells me that we are inherently bad, right? So we are inherently bad and we need to be seduced into being good. So if we are seduced into being good, and I think that's what 3 was pointing out, morality is not natural. It's a veneer. Everybody knows what I mean by veneer? Let's make sure, or varnish. Let's make sure everybody understands that because that's an important word. Let me see. Everybody sees what I mean by varnish? Nobody? Okay. All right. Varnish. Remember, it's like when you have, I don't know, varnish. What do you put varnish on? Like when you have shoes and you kind of shine them, right? You put some shiny thing on it, but the shoe is, suppose you have a very old shoe that's about to die and you kind of cover it with this nice shiny substance, that's a varnish. It's not really making the shoe new, but the shoe looks new. That's the idea. Varnish is just this kind of shine that you put on it, which is not really the actual thing. So for Hobbes, that's the point too, right? Morality is not natural, it's a varnish. It's just you're acting nice, but you're not really nice, right? And last thing for Hobbes, morality is equated with happiness, right? That's the incentive, right? You're going to be moral in order to be happy, right? That's the carrot, that's the incentive. Now, Kant is going to come along and on these 3 points, he's going to differ from Hobbes, right? So first of all, now this is the most important thing about Kant, because if you know Kant a little bit, it's surprising that he says this, right? Because he was actually raised a Christian, very strict conservative Christian, but he's going to sound very unchristian right now at the way that he describes human nature, right? It's actually quite brilliant. Even though he sounds very boring, this moment is really brilliant. He's actually going to say that we are not naturally evil. Not only part of us is, yes, but part of us isn't. So make sure you write this down, right? For Kant, we are not completely evil naturally, right? So he goes against here, both Hobbes and Christianity, by the way. Right, because Christianity, if you're familiar, especially Catholicism, maybe there is the Protestantism in Kant that is making him say that. But Catholicism, if you're familiar, says that we are naturally evil. We are born evil. Even the baby is born evil, and you have to baptize it, right? So we are born evil. And Hobbes says the same thing. We're wolves, and Kant is going to say maybe this is the Protestant, right, speaking through Kant. No, he says part of us is good, right? Part of us is pure. And so he's going to say part of us actually, so yes, we have a part which is selfish and wolf-like and ravenous, right? And we have a part which is actually moral, naturally. And if you look within yourself, it makes sense. Yeah, part of me is disgusting, but part of me is wanting to be good and altruistic and kind and empathetic. So we have kind of both, right? So that's the first difference, right? Kant is going to say that man has a good side too, not only a wolf, right? He also has a moral side. So now we're going to talk about that in a second, right? How does he describe this, right? But he basically says part of us is naturally moral. And so when you start to teach someone morality, right? When you write a treatise about what is good, what is evil, and so forth, actually that part of you is going to resonate with it. And so whatever you're learning from, the moral philosophy that you're absorbing, part of it is going to be like, oh, hell no, right? But part of it is going to be like, this sounds good. I like this. Yes, let's do it, right? So morality, to a certain degree, that's the second point, right? Oops. Oh no, I've been writing to Aguirre. All right, let me go back. Why didn't nobody tell me anything? Okay, so I was doing everyone to, okay, then I start, okay, sorry. So remember, if you look at the chat, Hobbes versus Kant, number 1, man is inherently a wolf. Number 2, morality is not natural. And number 3 for Hobbes, morality is equated with happiness. And now we're with Kant, right? So number 1, man has a good side too, right? This is versus Hobbes, who says we are wolves, right? Number 2 is what we are doing now, right? So if we have a good side, if part of us is moral, then morality will feel natural, right? So whatever you're reading, right, whether it's Hobbes' Leviathan or whether it's Kant's groundwork, right, part of you, is going to feel very comfortable with it, going to feel inspired, right? Awakened. Whereas for Hobbes, the wolf is always like, ew, right? Oh, I have to do this, but I don't want to, right? But for Kant, part of us is very naturally inclined to morality, right? Now, before I go to the next point, I thought I saw a question or something. What did I see? Ah, yes, thank you, Hakimian. You were the one who alerted me. Thank you. Okay, very good. Right, so far so good. Everybody following? Hands in the screen? Okay. Now, what's interesting, now this is the part that we are going to find difficult with Kant, right? For Kant, morality does not equate happiness. In other words, you don't do morality, you're not truly a moral person if you're acting out of self-interest. Does that make sense? Let me write this down because this is a big one, right? You're not truly a moral person if acting out of self-interest, right? In other words, if you're doing something for your sake, you're still a wolf, you're not moral. But if you're doing something not for your sake, but because it's the right thing to do, because the moral part in you is saying we should do this, then, says Kant, at that moment, because you're thinking not of yourself, but of the right thing to do, now you are inside. You're what's the word? Your motivation is moral, right? So he's saying, really, we have to work not only on the outside behavior, but Kant is looking at the motivations. What are your motivations when you're acting? Are you thinking of yourself? Even you're doing something good, are you thinking of yourself? If so, you're not moral at that moment. You're not performing a moral action. You're performing an action which will bring you happiness. Okay, you're only moral when you're doing something not for your sake, but for the sake of happiness. I'm sorry, for the sake of is the right thing to do. And in fact, the more painful the thing you're doing, the more moral you are on the spectrum, right? Okay, let's see your hands, couple hands. Morissette and Hakimian, go ahead.
Oh no, my hand was up earlier. Sorry.
Very good, Hakimian. Go ahead, Hakimian.
Yeah. So isn't there like a problem or like a controversy with like the idea of altruism? Like, is altruism really real? Because even when we're doing it for the sake of doing something good, like we're doing it because it's good, so we want to do some, like our motivation isn't like, I don't know how to word this properly, but I've like read up on it. And
yeah, so a lot of people will tell you we are in a culture now where we have a strong research going on that nothing that we do is without self-interest, right? There is a strong philosophical school that says that even if you're altruistic, actually deep down you're doing it to feel good in some way, right? So we need to remember that is just a school school of thought, right? There's the opposite school of thought that is just as convincing, right? And Kant is belonging to that other school of thought, but we're not used to it because we are actually living in a culture which is very materialistic, right? So we are, constantly being fed the idea that, and remember, our civilization is based on the text of Hobbes, Locke, and so forth, right? We have grown out of this philosophy, not of Kant, right? So we're used to thinking this is natural, but is it, right? In fact, you cannot prove scientifically either way, right? These are just arguments going back and forth. So you have at one point to decide what feels right, right? Because there's no scientific basis for either of them. We cannot scientifically analyze the moral consciousness, right? So it's just a school. And I'm presenting to you another school. At the end of, when we're done with Kant, you all have to decide, right? Which one feels right to you. Does that make sense, Hakimian?
Yeah, thanks.
So I take what I'm arguing is that there is no scientific basis for either one of these views, right? You cannot analyze moral consciousness under a microscope. Yeah, they'll give you statistics and so, but you can't know, right? So we have these two schools gonna stay in antagonism. Okay, Morissette, go ahead.
I would actually, I don't know, like I do think that human beings are selfish. I do. But then on the other side, when you look at from a point of view of parenting, for example, like a mother, can we say it's the same? For example, a parent, I know and I have seen like some parent will go beyond, like above and beyond for their children. That's another kind of love. You can't be saying that this is a selfish love. For example, a parent will actually run into a fire, get killed, try to save their own child. So that's another kind of love that cannot be posed as selfish or good. You will not try to kill yourself trying to get someone else to leave. Like, it just doesn't correlate to me.
Yeah, and I would add a stranger might go in the fire and save someone, right?
Yes, exactly.
Without even thinking, right? So now some people will say, that's instinct, but you know, these are words. Is it instinct? Right? So we don't know, right? Let's remember especially when it comes to philosophy, when it comes to these concepts, right? We can't analyze them under a microscope. We can speak about them and we can lay out the different perspectives, but none of them have been proven. Right? So let's not be in other words, let's not be too sure of ourselves, right? That's all I'm saying, right? Might be that Kant is right. Might be that Hobbes is right. Who knows? Okay. Now, going back to what I was saying with Kant, right? So, I don't even know where I was. You're not truly more a person if you're acting out of self-interest. Yes, so Hakimian was saying everything is out of self-interest. Kant would disagree, right? And he would say, yes, it's true, a lot of what we do. And Kant agrees, a big percentage of our decisions is based on self-interest, right? But there are moments and where it becomes evident that there's also another part of us, right? Just as natural as self-interest, but there's also another part of us which sometimes makes us rise above our instinct for self-preservation in order to do the right thing, right? And so when you choose to do the right thing, you're not thinking anymore of your happiness. You're doing it not because you're happy, but because the right thing to do. And what is the incentive? There is no incentive, right? At least in terms of happiness. Now, there might be incentive in terms of your integrity, who you are as a person. I choose to do this because that's who I am. I have integrity, right? But Kant does not equate that feeling of self-respect and integrity with happiness, which is for him means just feeling good, right? So you might do these things, right? Somebody might be doing the right thing and feel good about it, but it's not the same good as feeling happy about it. Does that make sense, Hakimian? Are you seeing the distinction?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So I feel good when I make a self-sacrificial decision, right, for the sake of the right thing to do. I do feel good, but it's a different good than I'm happy and, you know, I'm about to burst with, you know, pleasure. No, I'm not, right? I'm suffering and this is difficult, but part of me feels reinforced. Part of me feels like, okay, I'm following who I truly am. And this, Kant says, that's that moral part of you, which is, right, feeling amazing when you actually, but you can't equate that feeling with what Kant calls happiness, which is just feel good, right? A feel good feeling. Okay, so we'll see that. We'll see as we get in the text, right? These concepts. So I'm already preparing you, right? So make sure you remember, right? Man has a good side too. Morality will feel natural. Morality does not equate happiness. This will already help you navigate. Okay, now let's go. Any questions so far on the content? Because now we'll just go into biography. Anything anybody wants to add or clarify before I go to the easy stuff?
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying, I think I understand what he meant by when he said the more moral it is, the more it actually it's painful or it hurt, or because it's like sometimes when you take some moral decision, they're usually not the easiest one to take. They like the one that you have to bypass a lot of things. You know, you're like, okay, I know it's the best thing to do, even if it doesn't benefit me, if it doesn't make me happy, but this is what I have to do.
Exactly.
So
You got it, right? So, and there's a spectrum of morality. Some actions, they are moral actions, but they make you feel good. They may give you happiness. So that's in the middle. That's not that great. But the more you move into pain, the more you're sacrificing something you want for the sake of the right thing to do, the higher you're on the spectrum you are, right? In terms of being a truly moral person, because you are really hitting at the wolf. You are destroying the wolf. Each time you do something against your self-interest, you are taking a little piece out of the wolf, right? So in that sense, you're higher on the moral spectrum. Okay, so let's, anything else before I go into the biography? Okay, all right, just a few words of about Kant himself, his biography. So he was born in 1724, and he died in 1804. In Germany. Well, at the time it was Prussia. So actually today it's on Russian territory where he was born, but at the time it was the Prussian Empire, which was what became later on Germany. So he was the fourth of 11 children, and his parents were very strict, conservative Christians, right? So he grew up in a kind of stifling environment. So when he left to go to school, it was kind of like, right, he was breathing again. And he threw himself in his studies, and he actually double majored in physics and philosophy, right? At the time, Newton was very big, right? Newton had just come out with, you know, his new understanding of the universe based on mathematics, right? This idea that we can read the code of the universe through mathematics, that mathematics is the language of the cosmos, right? That the more we explore mathematics, the more we can understand the workings. So this was fascinating, right, for Kant. So he was studying that, and then philosophy, right? So he actually veered off eventually into philosophy, and he was, of course, obsessed with the main concept of the times, which was reason, right? So, and you will see in his philosophy, he brings up reason a lot, and we'll talk about that, right? So, there's nothing much to say about him. He was a very boring person in terms of his life, because he kind of had a schedule. He was very organized. So he would do every day. He wasn't really teaching. I think he was teaching to maybe a few students who would come to his house. He must have been wealthy. And he would write mostly, right? But he had this very rigid schedule. And so, in fact, every day at 3 p.m., sharp, he would go out of his house and take a walk around the block, and his neighbors used to reset their clocks based on when they saw him pass, because he was so punctual. He was even more punctual than their own clocks, right? So that gives you an idea. He writes that way too, right? So what's interesting is that he looks very ordinary and boring, right? You have, I mean, as a person and as a writer, when you start reading Kant, you're going to be like, oh my God. In fact, me, I don't know if I told you this, but when I signed Kant, I hadn't read him yet. I knew I wanted to teach him, but I hadn't read him. And I remember I had just one day to figure out what I was going to say in class. Class was Monday, and it was Sunday. So I started reading the whole book. I figure I need to at least have the whole book down. If I was small, I'd get through it in 4 hours. No. So I was reading. By the time I was in the second hour, I was like, what have I done? Why did I assign this? I should have read this. This is horrible. This is boring as hell, right? So, but I had to continue because it was assigned. So this is what happened, right? As I started to continue, as I persevered, right, my eyes got accustomed. You know how you get accustomed to the dark? It's the same with Kant. Your intellectual eyes have to get accustomed. And once they get accustomed, you will notice the brilliant moments that are in his philosophy. There are moments in his philosophy that are incredibly profound and progressive, right? In other words, philosophers came to these ideas much later, but he already has the intuition, right? So he's actually quite brilliant. So don't get sidetracked by the boring, tedious style that he uses to write his philosophy. He is actually quite brilliant and profound, right? So, but your eyes have to get accustomed. So by the time I was done, after the 4 hours of my eyes getting accustomed, I realized, okay, thank God, this was a good choice, right? There's so much there that is powerful. So just be, right, he's going to be difficult initially to kind of get used to it, but if you persist, your eyes will get accustomed, right? So anyways, let me give you, before you start reading, a few key concepts that will come up in the reading so that you already know what's happening. So remember, I told you that for Kant, human beings have both a bad side and a good side. And he has two words for this: instinct and reason. Okay, so these are two words that are going to come up a lot. Am I writing to everyone? Yes. Okay. So for Kant, instinct is the part of us which is only interested in our happiness. Okay, so forget all the definitions you learned, okay, by the way, about instinct and reason. He's giving a different definition, right? So make sure you write this down. Instinct is the part of us which is only interested in happiness. That is to say, feeling good right now, right? You want to eat that chocolate, you eat the chocolate, right? So it's also delayed. It can also be delayed happiness, by the way, right? I'm not going to eat the chocolate now because it will taste better in front of the TV, right? So that's, so even delayed gratification, still instinct, right? Now, reason, he's going to call that part of us which is moral. Now, make sure you don't mix up reason with what Kant calls understanding, right? Reason is not understanding. Understanding for Kant is just your brain figuring things out, right? Reason for Kant is not something in your brain. Reason is more akin to what you would call the voice of conscience. I don't know, right? This is one of the ways we could describe it. It's more of a voice or a feeling that, which tells you, right, where you sense, right, or know what the right thing to do is, right? In other words, we all have it, right? Suppose you're about to cheat on your exam. No, most of you are you have lost all sensitivity when it comes to that. So let me not use that example. Suppose you're thinking you're contemplating cheating on your boyfriend or girlfriend, okay? Here. Now, part of you is like, yeah, let's go, let's do it. That's instinct, right? Part of you, and it's not in your head, right? It's kind of, I don't know where it is, right? But you're hearing a voice, or you're sensing, right? That, no, that's not no, we're not going to do this, right? It's not right. Anytime you're saying it's not right, that's reason, okay? So reason is the part of us which says to you, reason is the part of us, or the voice, which says to you, that's not right. Okay, everybody clear? So it's not a mental thing, right? Oh, I forgot to send it. Okay, right? So it's not like you're not sitting here, figuring things out in your brain, right? It's a different a faculty. Okay, everybody clear on that? That reason is not the understanding. Reason is not the brain. Put your hand out. Okay, it's that.
So it's not the voice that says you might get caught.
No, that's instinct. Very good, very good. No, instinct is like, whoa, let's not do this because we might get caught, and then how miserable will we be, right? So instinct is always thinking about self-preservation, self-protection, happiness. Reason doesn't give a damn. It doesn't care if you're going to die at the end of the day doing this, right? It's the right thing to do, right? Now, so that's the two concepts. So of course you'll get the two other concepts of happiness, right, which we talked about, and the good, right? So obviously happiness is what instinct is thinking about, and the good, right, the highest good, or the right thing to do, right, that's what reason is thinking about. So the good, when he talks about the good, he means the right thing to do, right, which has nothing to do with happiness, right? Now, let me make this very clear, right? What Kant is talking about is an inner voice. So basically, according to Kant, we don't need to be taught to be moral. We have it, right? All of us know. So Kant at no moment is going to tell you what to do. Not like Hobbes, who is outlining, here's what you need to do to create a good society, here are the rules. No, Kant is not going to give us any rules, right? Because for Kant, we know. We have it, every single one of us within our being, we have that voice. Now, some of us, the voice is very small and the voice of instinct is very big, but we all have more or less a proportion of the two, right? So Kant is never going to tell you what to do. He doesn't believe that he should be doing that. All he's doing in this book is trying to help you become more aware of that voice. So he's basically describing that faculty so that we become more aware. And he's also describing what that voice sounds like, because often it's easy to mix up the two. Instinct often dresses up as reason, right? It makes itself sound like the right thing to do, but deep down when you dig a little, it's all instinct, right? So we need to learn to distinguish between the two voices. That's our problem. Very often you'll see when you're stuck in a dilemma, you have a voice saying the right thing to do. You'll have the clear voice of instinct saying happiness, and then you'll have another voice mixing it up, right? And so you won't know. You'll get mixed up, right? Should I do this? Why should I do this? And you can't distinguish between the two. So reading this book actually gonna help us distinguish clearly when it's the voice of reason and when it's the voice of instinct, so that at least you can make an informed choice. You're free to choose instinct, by the way. Kant doesn't care. You can go and be an instinctual person, right? For him, of course, you'd be missing the higher destiny of man, which is to be a rational being. But, right, the main idea of the book is not to tell us what to do, is to simply show us this is what instinct sounds like, this is what reason sounds like. Now make an informed decision, right? Aguirre, question?
I mean, it's not a question. I mean, it's kind of a question because I was just asking myself, like, for when we are loving somebody else, we are following more our instinct than the reason.
Yes, most of our decisions are instinctual, but there are moments in the relationship. There are key moments in the relationship, especially when things go bad, where it's not going well. So how do you decide? And actually at that point, right, Kant is saying anytime you have a dilemma, need to follow your own reason, right? Because that's the highest part of you. So yes, there are moments even in the relationship where you will be torn between instinct and reason, right? Should I go? Should I stay? And you have to decide. And so often we don't know, should I go? Should I stay? You have to look which one is coming from reason, which one is coming from instinct. And then you can make a decision, right? And sometimes reason will tell you to go. Sometimes instinct will tell you to go, right? But the idea Kant says is we ought to listen to reason because that's the highest part of us, but often we get confused which one is which, right? So this will be helpful, right? Next time you're on the verge of a breakup, you can then start to figure out what is the right thing to do, what is the happy thing to do, and now you can decide to act either instinctually or morally, right? At least now you have clear view. Does that make sense, Aguirre?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. All right.
But it is just a little bit confusing to like kind of like differentiate both of them between reason and instinct in that moment.
Well,
Like,
I couldn't
like
understand.
it is kind of like difficult like to differentiate between reason and between instinct in the moment that you want to break up with someone, because you're like, which one do I have to hear? But both of them tell you different stuff, which is just making you confused.
Exactly. And this is what we're going to learn, right? In the next couple of days, we're going to learn how to distinguish. That way, when you're faced with a breakup, you can actually see clearly, I'm thinking of myself. Here, I'm thinking of the right thing to do. Now you can decide, now you can choose. Whereas before we're confused. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's the right thing to do. I don't know what I should do. And we get so confused. At least Kant, he's very boring, but he has brilliant contributions. He's going to clear up our minds, right? And so hopefully by the end of the Kant, right, you'll be able to know if you should break up or not, based, right, on the voice, that instinct or reason. Okay, Aguirre, you good?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, so now you guys are ready, right? You're ready for Kant. By the way, he's not impossible to understand, right? It's not like some of the authors we'll study later who are writing intentionally in a way that you can't understand, right? Kant is actually trying to be clear. The main thing you need for Kant is stamina. You can't just read one sentence, stop for 2 hours, come back. You have to start again, right? So Kant, you basically have to read till the end and then you get it, because his arguments are very long-winded. So you have to read till the end to get it. But he's trying to be clear. So that's helpful, right? So some of you will be able to understand a few sentences. Again, don't worry. You do the reading assignment. and you just ask your questions, do your criticisms. Just remember, you don't have to understand, you just have to experience, right? This voice. Okay, any other questions before we conclude? All right, good. Let me stop the recording.